Nick, so good to see you. Today, we're going to talk through 3 easy ways to jeopardize your retirement. According to Kiplinger, only 44% of people have ever calculated what they will need to live on in retirement. So, of course, first you need to crunch the numbers, then consider rethinking the way that you spend before you retire to ensure that you don't outlive your nest egg. So, let's talk through 3 very common pitfalls. First, of course, many retirees carry credit card balances, auto loans, mortgages, or other debt into retirement, sometimes as high as 55,000. That's according to Investopedia. So how critical is it to enter retirement debt-free, and what practical steps should we prioritize now to make that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say there's good debt and there's bad debt.
Hmm.
There's good debt that you can carry into retirement. You want to have that under control. That's not something that we want to have a large outstanding debt that we have no way to pay for it when we no longer have earned income anymore going into
Right.
retirement. But then there's also bad debt. There's some of those things that are depreciating assets that we're paying an absorbent, percentage on, or, we put it on a credit card, especially this time of year coming off of Christmas. We wanted to have this big grand Christmas, so we put everything on credit card. Now all of a sudden we're paying extra for those gifts that,
Yeah.
may still be sitting under the tree, may not be used, by our kids or our grandkids.
Have you been in my house, Nick?
We see that everywhere, and stuff. But, with that, it is very important to not carry on a lot of that bad debt,
Right.
that extra interest that's silently, eating away at our, checkbook that now all of a sudden doesn't have any sort of benefacting factor in our lives. So
Yeah.
trying to get rid of that is vitally important.
Right. All right. Number 2, this one, it gets me right here. A record number of parents, 50%, according to savings.com, are financially supporting their adult children with the average support around $1,500 a month. That includes expenses like groceries, cell phone bills, rent, health insurance, and even vacations. So, how do we prioritize our retirement while still helping our family?
Right, absolutely. So kind of goes back to that first statement that you made at the beginning of the video that we really have to understand what our expenses are.
Yeah.
That we know that, okay, we're spending this amount of money in retirement, whether that's to a mortgage, whether that's just our general living expenses, what's our insurance costs, our property taxes, all of that kind of stuff. Understanding what our monthly expenses are, then all of a sudden we can determine, can we help out, the next generation? And how much are we actually helping them rather than giving them?
Mm.
Sometimes we feel like we're helping. Hey, I'm giving you an extra $500 a month to pay for this, or an extra $1,500 a month to pay for that. But are we really helping them, or are we just, kind of pushing the snowball down the road that now all of a sudden they become reliant,
Yeah.
on this? And for them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet,
Right.
to move forward becomes much, much harder.
Right.
There definitely is, that family tie, that family pull, to be able to want to help them out
Of course.
monetarily, but to do that on an ongoing basis tends to not help them out and tends to be more of a ongoing expense for that individual. Now, some people
Right.
can't afford to do that, and some people you have to understand where those expenses are going. Um, to determine, hey, I do want to help out with the average, daily living, side of it. Maybe they need daycare expenses. Maybe they need, the cell phone bill occasionally helped out here. But are we paying for this extravagant lifestyle, for them to do it? Or are we helping them with the basics?
Right. And as you mentioned in the beginning, it all comes back to you build your budget first. If there's room and you want, then you help,
Correct.
right? Yeah. Sometimes we just
Absolutely.
don't get that order correct. All right, number 3, living large. Simply put, living beyond our means. But how can we determine if we're spending more than we should? Because this is such a delicate balance in retirement.
Absolutely. It's one of those, the old saying of keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
Are we trying to keep up with the neighbors down the street? And, they have this, we need that, type mentality. And it goes once again back to that budget. Here's what we need, to live on, to live comfortably, to do what we want, inside of retirement. When you drive up and down a street, 9 times out of 10, you don't have a clue whether that house has a mortgage on it, or that car, has an auto loan with it, or it's leased, or it's bought, or it's paid in full, all of this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, it gets to that instant gratification stage of, well, I want this and I want that. And, do we have the money to be able to pay for, that type of stuff? And it boils back to, do we have our necessities covered, each and every month going forward in retirement? Once we determine where that number is at, now all of a sudden, hey, we want to live a little bit larger, in this area of our life, or we want to be able to, back off of this so we can travel more, and so forth. There's different things, and there's pros and cons to having, each of these factors in our life. But, just keeping up with the Joneses tends to not be a great way, in retirement, and doesn't lead to a ton of satisfaction either.
Right. It's interesting, Nick, because these things are, again, easy ways to jeopardize your retirement, but also easily fixed when you just start with a plan and start with that spending plan, the budget. You know where your money's coming from, and you're not going to jeopardize your nest egg. So if somebody would like to do that, step one, again, with you, Nick, what's the best way to reach you?
Absolutely. Yeah. They can reach out to us online, ewgretire.com. There's a schedule an appointment link right there in the top right-hand corner, or you can give us a call, 937-498-1128. We'd be happy to sit down and talk through this and your retirement planning that you currently have in place. So,
Nick, thank you.
Thanks, Erin.